My name is Margaret Lane, I am 83 years old, and I never thought I would witness my own funeral while still breathing. But there I was, standing in the back of St. Mary's Chapel, dressed in a plain black coat with a silk scarf covering my silver hair. The room was filled with mourners, people I had known all my life, and others I hadn't seen in decades. Candles flickered against the polished wooden casket at the front. On top of it sat my favorite photo, the one taken on my 75th birthday, where I was laughing with a slice of cake in my hand. My heart twisted as I saw it. They had chosen that picture as if I were already gone. My own children, Clara and Peter, were at the front row crying crocodile tears, whispering to the guests about how much they had done for me. My daughter-in-law, Susan, kept glancing at her watch as though the whole ceremony was a boring formality she needed to get through. They didn't know that under the layers of grief on my face, there was fire burning inside me. They didn't know I had walked in with my lawyer, Mr. Grant, who was seated quietly in the back pew, holding a briefcase that would soon tear their world apart. I stood still, letting the anger settle, watching them make speeches about how wonderful I had been. Hypocrisy. These were the same people who had plotted this funeral to declare me mentally gone and take my house, my land and my savings. They had gone as far as telling the neighborhood that I had passed peacefully in my sleep. They forged documents, spread rumors, and planned to bury me not in the ground, but in silence as they feasted on my life's work. My breathing grew heavy as the priest announced, "Before we proceed to the closing, if anyone has words to say about Margaret, now is the time." I took one slow step forward. The room froze. Clara's face went pale. Peter's mouth dropped open. Someone gasped so loudly it echoed against the chapel walls. "It can't be," someone whispered. I walked slowly down the aisle, my cane tapping against the floor, each step echoing like a drumbeat of judgment. Gasps filled the air as I stood in front of my own coffin. I turned to face them all, and in the steadiest voice I could manage I said, "I am not dead." The room erupted into chaos. Guests screamed, others crossed themselves, and my children. Oh, my children, they looked like they had seen a ghost. I raised my hand, silencing the room. "You all planned my funeral," I said coldly. "But today I'm here to bury something else, your lies." Then I turned to my lawyer, who opened his briefcase slowly. Inside were papers, recordings, evidence. I stared directly at my children as I said, "And today, everything you've done is about to be exposed." The room fell into stunned silence. You could hear a pin drop. Then Clara stammered, "Mom, what are you doing here? You're supposed to be dead." I cut her off, stepping closer. "Oh no, darling. I'm very much alive. And I'm about to take back everything you tried to steal." At that very moment, the doors to the chapel burst open, and a man in a black coat walked in. His presence sent a shiver through the crowd. He nodded at me, then said, "Mrs. Lane, it's time." Everyone turned, confused and frightened. What was happening? What did he mean by "it's time"? I smiled faintly, never breaking eye contact with my trembling children. "You're about to find out." And just like that, the funeral of the living turned into the beginning of their nightmare. Because what they didn't know was that this was only the start. What happens next will shock you even more. My children thought they could declare me dead to the world, but they underestimated a mother who built everything with her own hands. Do you want to know how they dared to do this to me, and how I turned the tables on them? Stay tuned for the next chapter. Where are you watching from? Comment below and tell me. Have you ever been betrayed by someone you love? You might be wondering how my own children came to believe they could plan my funeral while I was still alive. To understand that, you need to know who I was before all of this began. My name is Margaret Lane, and I spent my life building everything my family now fights over. I was born in a small town in Ohio during the rough years of the Great Depression. My parents taught me that survival meant working twice as hard and loving with everything you had. I carried those lessons into my adult life, raising Clara and Peter after my husband, John, passed away when they were still young. I worked 3 jobs to keep a roof over our heads. I saved every penny, invested in real estate, and over time I managed to buy a large farmhouse and a few rental properties. They weren't much by city standards, but in our town they were worth a fortune. I thought these things would secure my children's future. I thought they would understand the sacrifices I made for them. But I was wrong. For years, I ignored the small signs of greed. Clara, my eldest, became obsessed with status. She married a wealthy man who later left her, and since then, she's lived on the edge of debt. Peter, my son, was always charming but lazy. He relied on me for financial help, promising to pay me back. Promises that never came true. And Susan, his wife, never hid her dislike for me. She once said, "Old people should hand over their assets while they're still breathing." At the time I laughed it off, but her words stayed with me. Last year I fell ill. It wasn't serious, just a pneumonia scare, but I was bedridden for a few weeks. That's when they started circling me like vultures. Clara visited once, bringing flowers and asking about my will. Peter came by not to care for me, but to ask about the title deeds to my house. They thought I didn't notice their whispers, the way they searched through my drawers when they thought I was asleep. But I noticed everything. Then one evening I overheard Susan on the phone. She was in my kitchen, thinking I was asleep upstairs. "Yes, we'll have it all soon," she said, her voice low. "The old woman won't last long, and even if she does, we can declare her incompetent." My blood ran cold. I stayed quiet, playing the role of the fragile old woman. But inside something was burning. I contacted Mr. Grant, my lawyer, who had been a trusted friend of my late husband. I told him everything. He advised me to update my will, transfer ownership of my properties to a trust they couldn't touch, and start documenting every suspicious thing they did. Together we built a case without them knowing. Weeks later I recovered, but I pretended to stay weak. It was the only way to see their true colors. And they showed them. They told neighbors I was losing my mind. They restricted my access to my own bank account, claiming they were helping me manage my finances. They even tried to move me into a nursing home without my consent. When I refused, they became colder, crueler. One night I overheard Peter say to Clara, "Why wait? Let's just hold a memorial, announce she's gone, and finalize everything. No one will question it." Clara hesitated at first, but Susan convinced her. "We can say she passed quietly. People will believe it." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My own children, planning my funeral while I was still alive. That night I didn't sleep. I knew I had to act. But first, I let them proceed with their wicked plan. I wanted to see how far they would go. Days later the invitations went out. They didn't know I had intercepted one through a neighbor. That's when I called Mr. Grant and told him, "It's time." We prepared everything. Documents, evidence, and the element of surprise. On the day of the funeral, I dressed quietly and took a cab to the chapel. My lawyer followed behind. I watched from the shadows as people entered, whispering condolences, not realizing the woman they were mourning was standing only a few feet away. And then, you know what happened next. I walked in, alive, breathing, and ready to expose them. But that day, in the middle of the shocked crowd, something else happened. Something I didn't expect. As the lawyer opened his briefcase, a man I hadn't seen in over 40 years walked through the doors. His eyes locked on mine, and my heart stopped. "Margaret," he said, his voice trembling. "After all these years." Who was he? And why did he show up at my fake funeral? You won't believe the secrets that man brought with him. Secrets that would change everything. Stay tuned for the next chapter, because the story is only just beginning. Where are you watching from? And tell me, what would you do if your own family betrayed you like this? Leave your thoughts below. The chapel fell into silence. All eyes turned toward the stranger standing in the doorway. He was tall, with graying hair that hinted at the man he once was, and his sharp suit spoke of someone who had done well in life. But it wasn't his appearance that froze me. It was his eyes. Those piercing blue eyes I had not seen in 40 years. My chest tightened as memories I thought were buried came rushing back. "William! I whispered, my voice barely audible. Gasps rippled through the room. Clara turned to Peter, whispering harshly, "Who is that?" Susan looked annoyed, as if this unexpected twist had ruined her perfect scheme. Guests began murmuring, speculating who this man could be and why he had come to a funeral where the deceased was very much alive. William stepped forward slowly, his gaze never leaving mine. "You look just the same," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Older, yes, but still the woman I once knew." I felt my legs tremble, and I gripped my cane tighter. This was a man from a chapter of my life I had locked away, my first love before I married John. We had been inseparable until he left town suddenly, leaving me heartbroken. I had heard rumors he went overseas, maybe married someone else. I never expected to see him again, least of all today, at my fake funeral. "What are you doing here?" I asked, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. William smiled sadly. "I read in the papers that Margaret Lane had passed. I couldn't believe it. I came to pay my respects. But now I see the truth." He turned to the crowd, his voice rising. "This woman is alive. And whoever planned this should be ashamed." Clara's face turned red. "This is none of your business," she snapped. "You don't know what's going on here." "Oh, I know more than you think," William said sharply. He pulled out an envelope from his coat. "Your mother isn't the only one who has secrets. And what I have here," he waved the envelope, "will make every single one of you rethink what you've done." The guests gasped again, whispers spreading like wildfire. My lawyer, Mr. Grant, stepped closer, his eyes narrowing at the envelope. "What is that?" he asked cautiously. William looked at me. "It's something I should have told you years ago. Something about the land you live on, Margaret. And the inheritance you think is yours." My knees nearly gave out. The land. The inheritance. What could he possibly know after all these years? Peter stood up angrily. "This is ridiculous. Mom, tell this man to leave. He's obviously here to cause trouble." But I could see fear in his eyes. He was worried because secrets were the last thing my children wanted exposed. William's gaze hardened. "You all think you can deceive this woman, take what's hers, and walk away clean. You're wrong. I came back to make things right, no matter how ugly the truth is." The tension in the room was suffocating. Guests shifted uncomfortably, torn between curiosity and fear. My lawyer gave me a questioning glance, silently asking if we should proceed with our plan or let William speak first. Before I could answer, William tore open the envelope, pulling out documents. He looked at me one last time. "Margaret, you deserve to know the truth. You always did." My breath caught as he unfolded the papers. But before he could read them, the chapel doors slammed open again. This time it wasn't a stranger, it was the sheriff. "Stop right there," the sheriff barked, his hand resting on his holster. "We've had a report of fraud involving a staged death and possible property disputes. No one leaves this room." Gasps filled the air. Clara went pale. Peter stammered, "Sheriff, it's not what it looks like." "Oh, it's exactly what it looks like," I said, stepping forward with fire in my eyes. "And today, every lie you've told is going to burn." But as the sheriff walked toward us, William suddenly clutched his chest and collapsed to the floor. Screams erupted. The papers scattered across the ground. I dropped to my knees beside him. "William, stay with me." His lips trembled as he whispered, "The papers. Read them, Margaret, before it's too late." Then his eyes closed. The room erupted into chaos. And in that moment I realized, the truth was now in my hands. But what did those papers say? And why was everyone so desperate to keep them hidden? You won't believe what I found when I picked up those documents. The secrets buried inside them would turn everything upside down. Stay tuned for the next chapter. You do not want to miss what comes next. Where are you watching from? Have you ever uncovered a family secret that changed everything? Comment below, I want to hear your story. The chapel was in complete disarray. People shouted, Others rushed to call an ambulance, and the sheriff tried to control the crowd. My heart pounded as I clutched William's lifeless hand. Tears blurred my vision, but my other hand reached for the scattered papers. I gathered them quickly, tucking them close to my chest as if they were my own heartbeat. These documents, whatever they contained, were the very reason William had come back after all these years. The sheriff knelt beside me. "Mrs. Lane, are you all right?" I swallowed my grief and nodded. "I'm fine. But this man, he needs help." Paramedics arrived moments later, pushing through the crowd. They worked quickly, checking his pulse. One of them looked up at me and shook his head. "He's alive, but barely. We need to take him now." They lifted him onto a stretcher, and as they wheeled him out, he reached for me weakly. "The papers," he rasped. "I have them," I whispered, squeezing his hand. "I promise." The doors closed behind him, leaving the chapel buzzing with whispers. Clara stood frozen, her hands trembling. Peter muttered to Susan, "This is getting out of control." Mr. Grant approached me. "Margaret, let me see those papers." I nodded and handed them over. He opened the folder and scanned the first page. His eyes widened. "Oh my God," he muttered under his breath. "What is it?" I demanded. He looked at me, his face pale. "This isn't just about inheritance. This changes everything." Before he could explain, the sheriff stepped forward. "Everyone needs to stay put until I sort this out. There's been a lot of accusations flying around, and now we've got a possible attempted fraud case." Susan snapped. "This is ridiculous. She's old and confused. That man, he's lying. They're all lying." The sheriff's eyes narrowed. "Is that so? Because according to some witnesses, you and your husband were overheard discussing how to declare Mrs. Lane dead while she was still alive. Care to explain that?" Susan's face turned red. "They're making it up." Clara stepped in, her voice trembling. "Mom, you don't understand, we were just trying to protect the family." "Protect the family," I said, my voice rising. "By burying me alive. By stealing everything I built with my own hands. You call that protection?" My voice cracked with pain and anger. "You disgust me." The room fell silent. All the years of sacrifice, the nights I worked myself to the bone, the love I poured into raising them, it all felt like a cruel joke. Mr. Grant cleared his throat, holding up the papers. "These documents show that 40 years ago, William purchased half of the land Margaret owns. He never sold his share. He left it under her care, trusting her to keep it safe. But here's the shocker. He also wrote a clause stating that if he ever passed away without claiming it, the ownership would automatically transfer to Margaret's children, unless they committed fraud against her." Gasps filled the chapel. The sheriff stepped closer. "Fraud, huh? Well, based on what I've heard so far, I think we have more than enough to investigate." Peter shouted. "Those papers are fake. He's lying. This is all a setup." But Mr. Grant smirked. "Oh, they're not fake. I've already checked the signatures and dates. This is legally binding." My knees felt weak. William had protected me even when I thought he had abandoned me. He had trusted me with something far greater than I ever realized. Just then my phone buzzed. I pulled it out with trembling hands. A text message appeared on the screen. It was from an unknown number. "Don't trust anyone. There's more you don't know. Meet me tonight at the old barn alone." My heart skipped a beat. Who sent this? Was it connected to William? Or was it a trap set by someone who didn't want the truth revealed? I slipped the phone back into my pocket before anyone could notice. My instincts screamed that whatever waited for me at that barn was dangerous, but I had to go. The sheriff turned to me. "Mrs. Lane, I need you to come with me to make a statement." I nodded slowly, but my mind was already racing. I had to find out who sent that message. As I was about to leave with the sheriff, Susan suddenly lunged at me, grabbing my arm. "Give me those papers," she hissed. I yanked my arm free, glaring at her. "Over my dead body." She froze, and in that moment I saw the hatred in her eyes, the kind of hatred that kills. This was far from over. That night, when the house was silent, I slipped out with the papers hidden under my coat and made my way to the old barn. Every step was heavy with dread. My cane tapped softly against the dirt road as the moonlight guided my path. When I reached the barn, the doors creaked open slowly. A shadow moved inside. And then, a voice I didn't recognize said, "You shouldn't have come here, Margaret." My heart pounded as the door slammed shut behind me. Who was waiting for me in that barn? And what secret were they trying to keep buried? You won't believe what happens next. Stay tuned for the next chapter. Tell me, if you found out your family plotted against you, what would you do? Comment below and share your thoughts. The barn smelled of old hay and damp wood. My heart hammered against my chest as I stepped into the dim light. The shadow moved closer, and as the moonlight streamed through a broken window, I saw a man I didn't recognize. Tall, broad-shouldered, with a scar running across his cheek. He held a flashlight in one hand and a folder in the other. "Who are you?" I demanded, gripping my cane tightly. He smirked. "Let's just say, I've been watching everything. Your children, your lawyer, even that man who collapsed today. William wasn't the only one keeping secrets." Fear prickled my skin. "What do you want from me?" He took a step closer, his voice low and menacing. "I'm here to give you a choice. Walk away from all of this, sign over your properties, and you'll live out your days in peace. Or, keep digging and you won't survive to see the truth." My anger burned hotter than my fear. "You think you can scare me? I've lived through war, through loss, through pain you can't imagine. You don't know who you're dealing with." The man chuckled darkly. "You're stubborn. Just like William said you'd be." My breath caught. "You knew William?" "He hired me years ago," the man said, tossing the folder onto a dusty crate. "I was supposed to protect his interests. But when he disappeared, I had no orders. Until now." I cautiously picked up the folder. Inside were photographs. Pictures of my children meeting with shady lawyers, signatures on forged documents, bank transfers to offshore accounts. My hands trembled as I flipped through them. They had been planning this for years, far beyond what I suspected. The man leaned in. "You see, your children aren't just greedy. They're desperate. They're in deep with people who don't play nice. People who want your land because of what's under it." My head spun. "Under it?" He nodded. "Oil. Lots of it. William found it decades ago but kept it hidden to protect you. Now they know." The word echoed in my mind. My simple farmland, worth millions. That's why they were willing to kill me off on paper. Before I could respond, headlights flared outside the barn. Car door slammed. The man's expression hardened. "They're here. I have to go." He slipped out a side door just as the barn doors swung open. Clara stood there, her face twisted with rage, and Peter right behind her. "Mom," she spat. "You just couldn't stay out of it, could you?" Peter stepped forward, holding something that glinted under the moonlight. A crowbar. Fear gripped me, but I stood my ground. "What are you doing here?" Clara's voice was cold. "You left us no choice. Hand over the papers, and maybe we'll let you walk out of here." "You wouldn't dare," I said, but my voice wavered. Peter smirked. "Try us." Suddenly, from the shadows, Mr. Grant stepped out holding his phone up. "The sheriff is on his way. I've been recording everything." Clara's eyes widened. "You!" Before she could finish, sirens wailed in the distance. They froze, realizing their plan had backfired. I clutched the folder tightly to my chest. "This ends tonight," I said, my voice shaking with fury. The sheriff's car screeched to a halt outside. He stormed in with his deputies, weapons drawn. "Drop it," he shouted at Peter. Peter dropped the crowbar. His face drained of color. Clara screamed as they were both handcuffed. As they were led out, Clara hissed at me. "This isn't over." But it was. Or so I thought. The sheriff turned to me. "Mrs. Lane, you're safe now. We'll take it from here. But deep down I knew it wasn't over. The man from the shadows, the oil under my land, William's secrets. There was more to uncover. The next morning I received a call from the hospital. William had woken up. His voice was weak, but his words were strong. "Margaret, there's one last thing you need to know. Meet me. Alone." I knew I had to go. But what he told me next would shatter everything I believed. What was William hiding all these years? And how does it tie to my children's betrayal? Next chapter will reveal a truth so shocking, it will change everything forever. Comment below. Would you forgive your children after a betrayal like this, or would you fight back like I did? When I walked into William's hospital room, the beeping of the heart monitor was the only sound filling the air. He looked pale, but his eyes were still sharp, burning with urgency. I sat down beside him, clutching his hand like it was a lifeline. "You made it," he whispered, a faint smile crossing his lips. "I had to," I said softly. "There's too much I don't understand, William. What is really going on?" He closed his eyes briefly before speaking. "Margaret, the land, the oil, it's just part of it. The real secret is buried deeper." He motioned for me to open the drawer beside his bed. Inside was an old sealed envelope with my name written in his handwriting. My hands trembled as I pulled it out. "I wrote that years ago," he said. "Back when I knew someone would try to take everything from you. Inside are documents proving you're the sole rightful owner of everything. Land, assets, and even the mineral rights. But there's more. Something about your family you need to know." My heart raced. "About my family?" He nodded slowly. "Your children, they're not the only ones with claims. There's another heir, one they don't know about." My breath caught. "Another heir? William, what are you saying?" He coughed, his voice barely a whisper. "Years ago, before John, we had a child. Daughter. She was adopted out when we were young and poor. I spent decades searching for her. I finally found her. And she's closer to you than you think." The room spun. My mind reeled with questions. "Who is she?" His lips trembled. "You'll meet her soon. She's been protecting you from the shadows." Before I could ask more, the door burst open. A nurse rushed in, followed by two men in suits. Men I didn't recognize. They looked dangerous. "Step away from the patient," one of them ordered. I stood my ground. "Who are you?" "We're here for him," the man growled. "This doesn't concern you, old lady." But it did concern me. They tried to drag William out of the bed, but I screamed, "Help! Someone help!" Security stormed in, and chaos erupted. In the struggle, the envelope slipped from my hand. I dove for it, clutching it to my chest while the men were tackled to the ground. William's face turned toward me, tears in his eyes. "Protect the papers and find her. She's the key." The paramedics rushed in as his heart monitor flatlined. I screamed his name, but it was too late. William was gone. The sheriff arrived moments later, furious. The men in suits were arrested on the spot. When questioned, they refused to speak, but I knew. They were tied to the people after my land. That night, I returned home and locked myself in my bedroom. I opened the envelope with trembling hands. Inside were the original deeds, mineral rights documents, and a birth certificate. Proof of a daughter named Grace, born decades ago. The certificate listed William as the father, and me as the mother. My knees buckled. Grace, my lost daughter. The next morning I received another message. This time it was slipped under my door. It read, "If you want to find Grace, meet me at the old train station at midnight. Come alone." Fear and hope tangled inside me. Could this be real? Or was it another trap? I didn't care, I had to go. At midnight, the train station was eerily empty. I clutched the documents tightly, my breath fogging in the cold air. A figure stepped out from the shadows. She was tall, with striking features that mirrored my own younger self. "Mom," she said softly, her voice trembling. Tears filled my eyes. "Grace." Before we could embrace, Headlights blazed from the distance. A black SUV screeched to a halt, and armed men jumped out. Grace grabbed my arm. "Run!" she screamed. We darted across the platform as bullets shattered the night. I clung to her hand as we ran, but they were gaining on us. One of them shouted, "Get the documents! Don't let them escape!" Suddenly, a familiar voice roared from behind us. "Over here!" It was the mysterious man with the scar, the one who had warned me in the barn. He waved us toward a hidden exit. We slipped through as gunshots echoed. My heart pounded as we stumbled into a dark alley. Grace was crying, but she held on to me tightly. "We don't have much time," the man said, his face grim. "They won't stop until you're dead and the land is theirs." I clutched Grace to my chest, my anger boiling over. "Then let them come. I'm done running." The man smirked. "Good. Because it's time to fight back." But just as he spoke, an explosion rocked the ground behind us, and flames erupted from the train station. Grace screamed, and I held her close. Who planted that bomb? And how far will these people go to destroy us? The war for my land and my life has just begun. Stay tuned for the next chapter, where I take the fight directly to them. Where are you watching from? Would you risk everything to protect your family's legacy? Tell me in the comments. I want to know your thoughts. The fire at the train station burned bright against the night sky, casting everything in an orange glow. Sirens wailed in the distance, and the heat from the explosion pressed against my back as I held Grace tighter. The man with the scar pulled us into an abandoned warehouse nearby, closing the heavy door behind us. "We're safe for now," he said, his voice rough. "But they'll be back. They always come back." Grace was shaking. I pulled her close, my heart breaking as I whispered, "You're safe now, baby. I won't let anyone hurt you." It felt strange calling her baby. Decades had passed, but at that moment she was my child and nothing else mattered. The man, whose name I still didn't know, paced the room. "They've gone too far. That explosion wasn't just to scare you. They were trying to erase evidence. The people behind this, they control more than you realize." I glared at him. "Who are they?" He stopped pacing and met my eyes. "A corporate syndicate. They've known about the oil under your land for years. Your children got tangled with them when they borrowed money they couldn't pay back. The syndicate promised to forgive the debt if they handed over the deeds. That's why they staged your funeral. But now that you're alive, you're a threat they need to eliminate." Grace's voice trembled. "Mom, I found out about them while digging into my past. I tried to warn William, but they were watching me too. He told me to protect you at all costs." I looked at her, my chest swelling with both pride and pain. She had been risking her life for me, a mother she barely knew. The man handed me a flash drive. "This has everything: names, transactions, proof of their crimes. If you get this to the right people, they're finished. But be careful. They'll kill to keep it buried." Clutched the drive. "Why help us?" He smirked. "Because William saved my life once. This is me paying it back." Before I could respond, headlights swept across the cracks of the warehouse door. The man cursed under his breath. "They found us." We ducked as bullets ripped through the metal siding. Grace screamed, and I covered her with my body. The man pulled out a gun and returned fire, shouting, "Run! There's a back exit." We sprinted through the back, my cane clattering against the floor. Outside, a black van screeched to a stop. Mr. Grant jumped out, waving us in. "Get in. Now." We piled into the van as the man with the scar covered our escape. I caught one last glimpse of him through the rear window before the van sped off. He was firing at the attackers, buying us time. Then a flash of light engulfed the warehouse as another explosion tore through it. "Drive faster," I yelled, clutching Grace's hand. Mr. Grant's face was grim. "They won't stop. We need to go somewhere safe, somewhere they can't reach us." We drove for hours, leaving the city behind until we reached an isolated cabin deep in the woods. It was quiet, almost too quiet. Mr. Grant turned off the lights and said, "We'll stay here until morning. Then we go public with everything." That night, Grace and I sat by the fire. She told me about her life, how she had grown up believing her mother had died, how she searched for me for years, and how William had found her and revealed the truth. Tears streamed down my face as I listened. "I'm so sorry I wasn't there for you," I whispered. Grace shook her head. "You didn't know. But you're here now, and that's what matters." We sat in silence, holding on to each other. For the first time in years, I felt a piece of my heart heal. But just as I began to drift to sleep, the sound of crunching gravel outside jolted me awake. Peered out the window. Dark figures were moving toward the cabin. "They found us," I whispered. Mr. Grant grabbed his phone. "I'm calling the sheriff." But before he could dial, the front door burst open, and armed men stormed in. They grabbed Grace, yanking her away from me. "Let her go," I screamed, fighting with all my strength, but one of them shoved me to the floor. The leader stepped forward, his face hidden under a hood. His voice was cold. "Give us the flash drive, old woman, or you'll never see your daughter again." I glared up at him, my fists clenched. "You'll have to kill me first." He smirked. "That can be arranged." The night exploded into chaos as shots rang out and the cabin walls splintered. Who were these men? And how far would they go to destroy everything I love? In the next chapter, I take back control, and they won't see what's coming. Tell me, would you risk your life to protect the truth? Comment below because things are about to get even darker. The cabin became a battlefield. The armed men dragged Grace toward the door, while others pointed guns at me and Mr. Grant. My heart pounded so loud it drowned out the sound of the gunfire outside. The leader raised his weapon, aiming straight at me. "You have 10 seconds to hand over the flash drive," he growled. "Or she dies." Grace struggled, screaming, "Mom, don't give it to them." I stared at the drive hidden in my coat pocket. My instincts screamed to protect my daughter, but I knew if I surrendered it, we were all dead anyway. I took a shaky breath, my mind racing. Then, in a split-second decision, I hurled the flash drive into the roaring fireplace. Flames swallowed it whole. The leader roared in rage. "You fool! Do you know what you've done?" "Yes," I said, my voice trembling but fierce. "I've made sure you'll never get what you came for." Chaos erupted. The men tried to retrieve the drive, but the fire consumed it. At that exact moment, the sheriff's voice boomed from outside. "Drop your weapons. You're surrounded." The attackers hesitated. Flashing red and blue lights pierced through the windows as dozens of officers stormed the cabin. A fierce gunfight broke out. Mr. Grant shielded me while officers tackled the men to the ground. The leader was dragged out, kicking and screaming. "You'll regret this, Margaret Lane," he spat. "This isn't over." As they hauled him away, I rushed to Grace, who was shaken but unharmed. We clung to each other, crying in relief. The sheriff approached, his expression grim. "We've been tracking these men for months. They're part of a bigger network, corruption that reaches high up. You just exposed them." "But the evidence, it's gone," I said, thinking of the flash drive. Mr. Grant smiled faintly. "Not quite. I made a backup." He held up another identical drive, hidden in his jacket. "While they were busy threatening you, I duplicated everything." Relief washed over me like a wave. The sheriff took the drive. "We'll use this to bring them all down." By morning, the syndicate's leaders were arrested. The media swarmed the story. Elderly woman survives assassination attempt, exposes major criminal ring. For the first time, the world knew what I had been through. But the battle wasn't over. Clara and Peter were still in custody, facing charges for fraud and conspiracy. I visited them in jail. Clara looked at me through the glass, her eyes full of tears. "Mom, please forgive us. We didn't know it would go this far." My heart ached, but I stayed firm. "You chose greed over love. And now you're paying the price." Peter lowered his head, unable to meet my eyes. When I left the jail, Grace was waiting for me. We walked hand in hand, the morning sun warming our faces. For the first time in a long time I felt peace. Yet peace never lasts long. Days later, while sitting on my porch, I received an anonymous letter. It read, "You think it's over? The oil is still there. We're coming for it, and for you." My hands shook as I folded the letter. The war wasn't finished. It was only entering its next phase. That night, I gathered Grace and Mr. Grant. They're still coming. And this time we're going to strike first. Grace's eyes burned with determination. "Tell me what to do." I looked at her and smiled. "We fight back together. You won't believe how far I went to protect what was mine." In the next chapter, I set a trap so deadly that my enemies never saw it coming. Where are you watching from? What would you do if danger kept coming back to your door? Comment below, because the final battle is near. The days following the attack were tense and quiet, like the calm before a storm. Grace stayed by my side, never letting me out of her sight. Mr. Grant worked tirelessly, handing over evidence to federal agents while also keeping tabs on the movements of those still loyal to the syndicate. But deep down we all knew they weren't done. They were regrouping, waiting for the perfect time to strike. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, a black SUV parked at the edge of my property. It didn't move. I watched from my window, my cane firm in my hand. Whoever they were, they wanted me to see them. Message: "We're watching you." I wasn't going to wait for them to make the next move. This was my land, my home, and I would defend it. I gathered Grace and Mr. Grant around the kitchen table. "They think I'm weak," I said, my voice steady. "But we'll show them just how wrong they are." We came up with a plan. With the sheriff's help, we arranged a sting operation. My land, the very thing they were after, would become the trap that ended this once and for all. The next night, under the cover of darkness, law enforcement hid around the property while Grace and I staged a meeting at the old barn, the same place where it had all begun. Word was leaked that I would be there to negotiate, handing over the land rights. Just past midnight, headlights pierced the night. Multiple black vehicles rolled in silently. Men in suits and masks stepped out, armed and dangerous. Their leader, the same man who had threatened me at the cabin, stepped forward with a cruel grin. "So," he sneered, "the old woman finally came to her senses." I stood tall, cane in hand, Grace beside me. "No," I said coldly. "I came to end this." He laughed. "You think you can stop us? This land will be ours, one way or another." I took a step closer, staring him straight in the eye. "Not tonight." With that, I tapped my cane on the ground 3 times, the signal. Suddenly, floodlights blazed to life, blinding the intruders. Armed officers swarmed from every direction, shouting commands. Gunfire erupted as the syndicate tried to fight back, but they were outnumbered. The leader grabbed Grace, using her as a shield. "One step closer and she dies," he shouted. My heart pounded, but Grace struggled, elbowing him in the stomach. She broke free just as the sheriff tackled him to the ground. The fight was over in seconds. One by one, the men were cuffed and dragged away. As the leader was shoved into a police car, he glared at me with venom. "You may have one tonight, but the oil will always bring more. Someone else will come." I leaned in close, my voice like ice. "Let them try." By dawn, the news spread everywhere. Syndicate dismantled in dramatic raid on rural property. My land was safe, my daughter was safe, and for the first time in months, I felt the heavy weight on my chest lift. Grace hugged me tightly. "You're incredible, Mom." I smiled through my tears. "No, sweetheart. We're incredible, together." But just as we were about to celebrate, Mr. Grant approached with a serious expression. "Margaret, there's one last thing. During the raid, we found files suggesting that your children weren't just involved. They were working with someone even higher up, someone still out there." My stomach dropped. "Who?" He hesitated. "A man only known as the broker. He controls the flow of the oil market in the shadows. And he's already put a bounty on your head." The victory suddenly felt fragile, like a candle flickering in the wind. Grace's grip on my hand tightened. "We'll fight him too," she said firmly. I nodded, my resolve hardening. "If he wants war, he'll get it." The sheriff walked over, placing a hand on my shoulder. "Stay strong, Mrs. Lane. The final battle is coming." As the sun rose over my land, I knew one thing. This wasn't just about property anymore. It was about survival, legacy, and justice. And I would not go down without a fight. In the final chapter, I face the most dangerous enemy of all. The broker thinks he can take everything from me, but he has no idea who he's dealing with. Next chapter will leave you breathless. Tell me, have you ever fought against something bigger than yourself and won? Share your story below. The grand finale is next. The name The Broker haunted every conversation in the days that followed. He was a ghost in the oil industry, a man without a face who pulled strings from the shadows. According to the files Mr. Grant uncovered, he had been orchestrating everything. My children's betrayal, the syndicate's attacks, even the attempts to assassinate me. This wasn't just about my land anymore. This was about breaking me, destroying the legacy I had fought my entire life to protect. The FBI joined the investigation, but they warned me. The broker doesn't leave loose ends. They suggested I go into protective custody. I refused. "I won't run," I told them. "This is my home. If he wants me, he'll have to come here." Grace stood beside me, her jaw tight with determination. "Then we fight him on our terms." Mr. Grant worked day and night with the authorities, preparing for what felt like an inevitable final strike. Cameras were installed around the property. Armed deputies patrolled the land. But I knew the broker was smarter than the rest. He wouldn't come guns blazing. He would come with something far deadlier: deception. 3 nights later, under a sky heavy with storm clouds, a black limousine rolled slowly up my driveway. My heart pounded as I watched from my porch, shotgun resting across my lap. Grace stood beside me, fearless. Mr. Grant was already on the phone with the sheriff, who was waiting just down the road with backup. The car stopped. The door opened, and out stepped a man in an immaculate suit, tall and slender, with a calm smile that chilled me to the bone. "Mrs. Lane," he said smoothly, as if we were old friends. "I am the broker. May we talk?" I gripped my cane tighter. "Talk? After everything you've done?" He spread his arms as if he were innocent. "You've caused me a great deal of trouble, Margaret. But I admire you. Few people have ever stood up to me and lived to tell the tale. That's why I'm here to offer you a deal." I narrowed my eyes. "What kind of deal?" He stepped closer, ignoring the deputies emerging from the shadows. "Sign over the land. Walk away with your life and a fortune beyond your dreams. Refuse, and you and everyone you love will disappear." Grace stepped forward, her voice shaking with anger. "You won't touch my mother." The broker's smile widened. "Ah, the lost daughter. How touching." I took a step forward, meeting his gaze head-on. "You think you scare me? You think I'll give up everything I've bled for?" I raised my voice, letting it carry through the night. "No. This land is mine. My life is mine. And you're nothing but a parasite." His smile faded. "So be it." He snapped his fingers, and several armed men emerged from the trees, weapons raised. But this time we were ready. Floodlights exploded to life, and dozens of FBI agents swarmed the area, guns drawn. "Drop your weapons," they shouted. Chaos erupted as the men were tackled to the ground. The broker tried to flee, but Mr. Grant stepped in his path, blocking his escape. "You're done," I said coldly. For the first time, fear flickered in his eyes. He lunged toward me, but the sheriff's bullet shattered the night, grazing his arm and forcing him to the ground. Officers swarmed him, dragging him away in handcuffs. As he was shoved into a police car, he glared back at me. "This isn't over. There will always be someone else." I stood tall. "Then let them come. I'll be ready." The FBI agents assured me he would never see the outside of a prison cell again. The syndicate was dismantled, its leaders scattered, its power broken. The oil rights were secured in my name, untouchable by anyone else. In the weeks that followed, the land became a symbol of resilience. Reporters called me the grandma who took down a criminal empire. But I didn't care about fame. I cared about my family. Grace, the daughter I thought I lost forever, who now lived with me on the farm. Together we rebuilt what was broken. As for Clara and Peter, they served their sentences. When they were finally released, they came to my door, begging for forgiveness. I looked at them, my heart torn between love and pain. "I forgive you," I said softly. "But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting." They left with their heads low, knowing they had lost something far greater than wealth. They had lost my trust. On a warm afternoon months later, Grace and I sat on the porch, sipping tea as the sun set over the fields. The oil under our feet no longer felt like a curse. It was a blessing because it had revealed who my true family was. I turned to her and said, "You know what, sweetheart? They planned my funeral before I was dead. But I attended it, and I buried their plans instead." She smiled, resting her head on my shoulder. "And you lived to tell the world." I looked out at my land, my legacy, and my future, and I whispered, "They thought they could break me. But they only made me stronger. My fight was over. I had won." Life lesson. Never underestimate the quiet strength of someone who has nothing left to lose. When you stand for what is right, even the darkest enemies will fall. If this story touched your heart, showed you the power of resilience, and reminded you never to give up, like, comment, and subscribe. Tell me where you're watching from, and share this with someone who needs to hear it.